Welcome to Deep Dive Dialogue. Our topic for discussion today is the role of bioinformatics in advancing precision medicine, challenges, and opportunities. Bioinformatics is crucial in precision medicine, enabling the analysis of complex biological data for personalized treatment strategies. While it offers significant opportunities for improved patient outcomes, challenges such as data integration, standardization, and accessibility must be addressed to fully realize its potential in clinical application. We are pleased to welcome our speaker, Smita Agrawal, an accomplished leader in clinical genomics and bioinformatics. With extensive experience, she has held senior roles at Concert AI, Symphony AI, and Strand Life Sciences, guiding clinical data analysis and product development in genomics. With strong foundation in natural language processing and real-world evidence, she has published impactful research and collaborated with various institutions. Her expertise is in transforming clinical insight into innovative solutions. Welcome, Smita.
Thank you, Manisha. Glad to be here.
So, can you tell me what are the various ways in which bioinformatics can play a transformative role in landscape of precision medicine?
Yes, sure. So if you look at today's research, right, in today's world, we have techniques to measure, the gene level data, the RNA level data, proteomic data, metagenomics data, etc. Right. So all of these techniques give us data that are very vast and large scale data sets, right? So bioinformatics gives us the tools to analyze such large scale data sets and sort of integrate them and do a holistic analysis of that data. Um, if you look at the world of medicine, it is gradually but definitively shifting towards the realm of precision medicine or personalized medicine, right? I mean, the one solution fits all strategy that doctors used to adopt earlier, they've been trying to get away from that and try to give personalized treatment to patients. This is more accurate in some disease areas compared to others. For example, in oncology, definitely precision oncology is a very real thing today, and patients do get personalized treatments. But also, if you look at it, certain other disease areas also, even in rare diseases, with the advent of techniques like CRISPR and gene editing, we are moving towards the realm of precision medicine. Now, as you look at the research that's required to really, get to the real level of precision medicine, right? You have to integrate multiple data sets, right? As I mentioned, we have the genomics, the proteomics, the transcriptomics, but not just that, right? You want to integrate it with actual clinical data for the patients, their symptoms, their blood work. You also want to integrate it with their radiomics data, radiology, their histology data, and so on. So it's truly a multi-omics analysis that we need to do. And pharma companies are definitely striving to do that today, right? They're looking to do a lot of multi-omics data analysis to drive drug development in today's world. So here, definitely the role of bioinformatics becomes very crucial. But I would say not just bioinformatics, but bioinformatics combined with machine learning, AI techniques, and predictive analytics, right? So this all together becomes, one of the most important sort of toolkits that we need to have in order to move in that direction of precision oncology. If you look at, the sort of problems that you can tackle, right? So what is it that, and where can bioinformatics and these tools really help us in when we say precision, not just oncology, but precision medicine, right? So the first and foremost, of course, is, tailoring the treatment based on the patient's genetic makeup, right? So for example, if I take the example of oncology, we know today that different patients have different cancer markers, different driver mutations in their cancer, and based on the driver mutation, the right therapy, if given to the patient, they can have much better outcomes and benefits compared to just having a broad spectrum chemotherapeutic treatment, for example, right? So identifying the right treatment for a patient based on their genetic makeup is definitely one thing, the precision medicine realm that we talk about. Um, the next is, of course, pharmacogenomics, right? So if you talk about, okay, the first one was more what is the treatment required for the disease. Pharmacogenomics is, you may have multiple treatments available, multiple drugs, but how is the patient going to now again respond to those drugs, or how is their body going to metabolize and actually make the drug effective in the body? That also gets determined by genetics, right? So again, based on the genetics, like for example, mutations, certain mutations in the DPYD or the UGT1A1 UGT1A1 gene, they have effects on the metabolism of certain chemotherapies. Mutations in CYP450 have ramifications in the efficacy of warfarin, and so on, right? So having that understanding of the patient's genetic makeup, which of course is driven by bioinformatics, again gives us that leverage in really personalizing the treatment for the patient. The first part that I talked about was identifying the right treatment for the patient, treatments that already exist. But the next part is, of course, identification of new treatments, discovery of new treatments, right? So the biomarker discovery, target discovery, again, is very vastly driven by these multi-omics data analysis that I talked about, that these pharma companies are very keenly interested in today, right? So all of that also requires bioinformatics techniques. Then you have there's a lot of interest today in metagenomics and the microbiome in the gut, right? So there's a lot of talk about almost every disease now being linked to the metagenomics and the microbiome, right? Again, large scale, a multitude of bacterial genomes to be analyzed and processed. And again, the role of bioinformatics and big data analytics becomes very crucial there. Then, I touched upon the CRISPR gene editing, right, techniques. Those are now becoming almost now really becoming a reality for patients, treatment for rare disorders, and so on, right? So again, to identify the right target, to make sure that there are no off-target effects and so on, there's a very crucial role of bioinformatics there. Then if we talk about another personalized treatment today in cancer therapy, especially hematological cancers, right? We have CAR T therapy, again, where we use a patient's inherent T cells, the immune system, to target and destroy their cancer cells, right? So again, identifying the targets on the cancer cells, creating the chimeric antigens and engineering the T cells, right? All of that requires very detailed understanding and application of these bioinformatics tools, right? So there are, in all realms, there are multiple areas today where bioinformatics and big data analytics and AI is really playing a crucial role in the realm of precision medicine.
Right, right. So from metagenomics to gene editing, you have touched everything. And I believe that bioinformatics is really crucial. So my next question is that how can real world data be effectively integrated into clinical decision support system to enhance personalized treatment recommendations and improve patient outcomes?
Right. So, before I answer that, let me just touch a little bit about what really is real world data, right? So, if we talk about real world data, that's the data of patients who are actually being treated in clinics today, right? So, these are, the type of data, if you talk about, it's, the patient diagnosis to their, the various tests that are used in diagnosis, such as blood tests, histology reports, radiology reports, in genomic tests in certain cases, their family history, their comorbid conditions, any information about, all the information about what are the treatments that the doctor has prescribed to those patients, when the patients are taking those medications, as well as what is the outcome of those patients, right? So how well are they responding or not responding to their treatment, how the disease is progressing, whether the patients had any adverse events to these treatments. All of that information comes under the realm of real world data, right? And there are multiple sources of real world data today, right? So, of course, the EHR systems is one, right? With the digitization of the medical data, it becomes easier to actually use real world data as a resource. And this is sort of governed or driven by the adoption of EHR systems in the hospitals. So, that's a very big source of real world data. We also have, not so much in India, but if you talk about the US, and other European countries, we have the claims data, right? So because most of these patients are covered under insurance, and so when they claim for their treatment or for their medications, that also comes through the claims data sets. There are also patient registries that are part of that you can pull real world data from, or sometimes patient reported outcomes, right? So you can have apps where patients are reporting how they're feeling, when they're having adverse reactions and so on. And then in today's world, we also have these wearable devices and remote monitoring, right? So that's continuous data sometimes, with the smartwatches and everything that you can get for a patient. So that can also be integrated. And then last but not the least, again, there's a lot of socioeconomic data, right? Social determinants of health is what we call them. So that sort of data can also be integrated. So there's a varied source of real world data and a wealth of data that can be used. But just to distinguish it again from clinical trial data, right? Because clinical trial data is really the gold standard, if you say, in the whole drug development process. But first of all, the clinical trial data is generally done, generated on a very small and controlled population of patients, right? Patients with many ethnic groups, or many comorbid conditions, etc., may be excluded from the clinical trials. It's generally a small, cohort of patients that are followed uh, very deeply, right? So the richness of the data is very high in terms of following them at certain time intervals, doing all the relevant tests on them, and so on. So the quality of the data is very high, but the quantity is very low, right? So that's what a clinical trial gold standard data set is. On the other hand, if you go to real world data, the quantity is very high, right? You have so many patients being treated in the real world. You have diversity there. So you have patients from all ethnic groups, all socioeconomic conditions, different comorbid conditions, and so on, who are still taking the drug, even though that trial was not probably done for patients with those conditions. So you get a wealth of a very large quantum of data that you can leverage, right? So real world data has its pros and cons when compared to clinical trial data, but definitely today everyone recognizes the importance of real world data, and even FDA had some guidance where they were encouraging the pharma companies to use real world evidence and real world data in their decision making. So in terms of the personalized recommendations, right? So the use of real world data in, you asked, in clinical decision support, right? So that's where, when a patient is entering a clinic, sitting in a doctor's office, right? How can real world data be leveraged for the doctor to make the right informed decision? In order to do that, there has to be, of course, a system in place where the doctor has access to a software solution where once they input the information about the new patient and their clinical parameters and their test results, that data can then be matched or compared against the whole database of real world data in the backend, right? And so this can then help to kind of benchmark that patient against many other patients who are from a similar ethnic background, who have similar genetic mutations, who have certain similar comorbid conditions, etc., to then really tailor the treatment, right? And you can have some machine learning AI algorithms running on top of that, right? That can actually do this matching. It's almost humanly impossible to do it, right? But with these new techniques, you can then match this patient to the best patient or best patient cohort that you have in your real world data set, and say, okay, now I have these 20 patients who look very similar to my one patient, and out of these 20 patients, say 5 of them were given this drug and they reacted very badly to it, and 4 of them were given this drug and they had great outcomes, and 3 of them were given this drug and they had a great outcome for a little time, but then they relapsed, things like that, right? So you can match your patient to this data and then try to then come up with the best treatment that this patient should get to have the best outcome, right? So that's the idealistic situation that we want to get at. We're not there yet, but yes, that's the dream of how we would leverage real world data for clinical decision support. Of course, um, you know, it would also take into account the whole socioeconomic aspects of the patient and so on, right? So all of the different parameters that I talked about in the components of the real world data would all be kind of used to come up with the best decision, including patient outcomes, adverse reactions, and so on. So that, yeah, I think that's the dream of how we would use real world data for clinical decision support. We're still a little bit away from that dream to make it to a reality. This is clinical, any system that is clinical, that is trying to help make clinical decisions, which is not a human, has to go through very tough regulatory standards and the whole process, and go through the regulatory agencies like FDA and CD and so on. So yes, I mean, but that's the potential, I would say.
Right. And I believe that AI is coming up in a big way, and I truly believe that real world data will be integrated.
Yeah.
So, what are the potential benefits of developing collaborative bioinformatic platforms for global data sharing in precision medicine research?
Yeah. So if you talk about global collaborative platforms, right? I mean, the potential is very high. The of first of all, very collaborative research. It can accelerate the pace of research and innovation, and really do wonders for the whole research community if that becomes a reality, right? I'll talk about the challenges towards the end, but if you think about it, right, if you had a bioinformatics platform or any software platform that integrates bioinformatics and AI and machine learning and all of this real world data, for example, into one global platform, right? Um, we could accelerate a lot of things, right? So, drug development, for example, that is leveraging real world data. Right now, every country has, or everyone who's doing research has access to some data. No one has access to everything, right? So some people have access to some EHR data, some people have access to genomics, sometimes they combine them. They'll have access to claims, they will have access to, say, 20% of the data. Even if you talk about US researchers, right, some company may have access to 20% of the data, some company may have access to 30% of the data, and so on, right? So, and now if you not just at the country level, if you can sort of look at it at the global level, the volume of data that we will have, the sheer volume of data we will have, will accelerate a lot of the innovation, right? Because that makes sure that we cover the diversity of patient population, right? All ethnic groups, and different nationalities, and different socioeconomic status. Everyone, all of those patients will sort of be included in a single study. The statistical power of any study will be significantly enhanced if we have such large data sets, right? Right now, especially for patients who have very small populations, right? Rare disease patients or patients with some very rare mutations, even in oncology and so on, right? They are not represented enough, and then making any sort of conclusions about their drug response, or even doing a companion biomarker for those patients becomes very hard, right? So all of that sort of would become much easier to do. Of course, if you talk about other advantages, it's also, if something like this were to be instituted, that means that different countries have to follow the same regulations, right? Right now, every country has different regulations about data sharing and data privacy, and how the data is stored and how it's transmitted and so on. So, globally, we would have a standard for developing countries to increase their processes or increase the efficiency in their processes, and so the more developed countries who've already developed some standards, they may also they will help the other countries sort of get to that level as well, right? So that would also and it would also help in terms of health disparities, right? So countries or regions where access to healthcare is less, so all of those things would sort of start to show up when you have this global data platform. You can see which populations are not getting serviced enough, they're not getting access to the basic health needs, and that could also even help governments make better policies for those patients and so on, right now, without having a view of that data, it's almost impossible to even make or identify these patient populations and make those policies. Whereas, at least in the US, there's a lot of push for the last few years on health disparities and making sure that, healthcare is accessible to all socioeconomic groups and so on, right? So, and even pharma companies are they're doing a lot of research towards this. So I think all of these would be great advantages if we could come up with a global platform where everyone can share their data. Challenges, of course, we know there are a lot of challenges to this, that we need to overcome. I mentioned a few, just overcoming the policies of the different countries, right? Every country has its own policy. Sometimes every state has its own policy, so that's even worse, right? So I would say even if we can have like a for every nation one platform, that would be progress. But then, of course, the next step would be to do it globally. And then the policies and the data sharing rules, of course, is one. The way in which the healthcare systems work in different countries are very different, right? And access to healthcare is different, which would come to fore when we have these global data sharing platforms. But also, one of the challenges of using such a platform could be that even though you have patients who have very similar profiles in different countries, but just based on some basic accessibility to certain drugs or so on, right, they're being treated very differently, and so you may not be able to include all of those patients in your cohorts and so on. So those challenges will remain. Interoperability of the data and the different healthcare systems, that's going to be one of the biggest challenges, to harmonize that data for research purposes. That's definitely going to be one of the big challenges if we were to move in this direction. But I think the idea of this is very novel and great. I mean, and if it were to be implemented, it could definitely accelerate the pace of medical research and innovation.
Right. From nation to global. I think this is the way forward.
Right,
Uh,
right. Baby steps, right? So first, let's cross the boundaries of our own nation, and then we can cross international boundaries.
Correct. So my last question is, how can we tackle the shortage of skilled bioinformatic professionals in healthcare sector to keep pace with the growing demand of precision medicine?
Right. So first of all, I think the biggest challenge there is not the lack of people being studying, say, biotechnology or bioinformatics. I think there are a lot of universities and colleges who offer that course, and people are taking the course. But the real challenge that I face and I've seen is that students who what they're taught in these courses and what is really required in the real world, even when I say real world, in the industry today, and when we talk about these bioinformatics positions, there's a huge gap between that, right? So it's so I think the first need of the hour is really to upgrade and update the curriculum, right, in most of these courses, right? So and the best way to do that is to have like an industry partnership, maybe, and look at what are the needs of the industry in terms of the skills that they need when they're trying to hire bioinformatics professionals, and then reverse engineer your course to offer those skills to your students, right? So that, I think, updating the curriculum is the first and foremost thing that most universities should look at, for these bioinformatics courses. And as I, in my first point or my second point, I talked about, bioinformatics cannot be looked at in isolation, right? when you say bioinformatics, it necessarily deals with large data. And when you say large data, then you need to do predictive analytics. You need to be able to apply AI and machine learning, tools to that data, integrated do multi-omics analysis, right? So um, more and more, this is becoming a more multidisciplinary sort of a field, right? So these students should be taught not just the techniques in bioinformatics, setting up pipelines for genetic analysis or proteomics and so on, but also techniques for data analytics, for data science, for machine learning, for AI, for NLP, right? Because all of these will be things that practically, when they go and solve real world problems, they will need in their toolkit, right? Because otherwise, if they're dependent on someone else to do this, then you're not self-sufficient in the type of work that you need to do. Of course, I think most of the courses do teach basic biology, but I've also found students who are very lacking in, the basic, even the basic principles of biology, right? So now, when you're saying bioinformatics, you're actually tackling problems in the realm of healthcare and biology, right? So having that fundamental knowledge of the biological processes becomes very important again, because it should not be that I'm a bioinformatician and I'm just going to go and apply these algorithms or create these pipelines and then that my work is done. You have to first understand what is the problem that you're tackling, then come up with the best way to solve that problem, and then create the pipelines and do the analysis, right? So that whole end-to-end piece should be there in the curriculum. The next point I would say is, we probably have a lot of graduates in bioinformatics already, right? We could use them by upskilling and reskilling them, right? And that, companies can help with sponsoring, say, some e-learning course for them, or sponsoring some workshops or certification courses, having like a mentor-mentee type of relationship with a more senior person, where they can groom these people and guide them in what type of skills they should acquire and so on, right? So use the existing people that you have by giving them the right tools and the right education, but also in the pipeline, the fresh graduates that we're going to get, make sure that they have the right tools and right education to then get into the workforce and start being productive very quickly, right? So that's those are two, I think, key points. But other than that, I think the third important point in my mind is also just the public awareness, right? Especially when you talk about the Indian system, right? If you ask a STEM student what they want to study, someone going into college and they're STEM and they're going towards engineering, everyone will say computer science, right? Because that's the top paying job. Or bioinformatics is a very, it's not a very clear term, right? So I think we need to clarify what a bioinformatician does and what their role and impact to healthcare could be, and what are the types of problems that they would be working. I don't think if you go and ask a college student today, as a bioinformatician, what would you like to do, they would have a very clear answer, or even an aspiration of what are the types of things that they could be working on, right? So having that public awareness and really telling the students what it means to be a bioinformatician. You could be at the cutting edge of research, developing new therapies. What is the impact of your work? And maybe share some success stories with them, right? So that really gives brings in the excitement to that profession. And I think that's really required to get today's kids excited about this career opportunity and growth, right? So I think those are the key things that we should do to really bridge the gap. If there is a gap, well, there's a gap between the knowledge and what's required, but I personally don't feel there's a huge gap between the number of bioinformaticians available and that we need, right? So that's if that is also a gap, then of course the next step would be to maybe add some AI techniques and so on to kind of take away some of the mundane work. So, but I don't think we need that right now.
Right. So your insights have really been invaluable, and I feel that you have given us some clarity of what bioinformatics is and what bioinformaticians are required to do. Thank you so much for joining us today. Have a great day.
Thank you, Manisha. It was lovely talking with you. Thank you.
Thank you. Bye.
Bye.